Welcome back to part 3 of Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 96, the new Shanghai Proof of Weapons Network. In part 1, we discussed everything that happened this week in Bitcoin and the civil war that's happening in the Bitcoin space. In part 2, we recovered the SCO meeting, the Shanghai meeting, and the implications with the new Shanghai Proof of Weapons Network. And in part 3, I'm going to be analyzing the latest that is happening for this managed exit of the US Proof of Weapons Network from the Middle East, how that relates to what's happening with the Gaza genocide, and then the leaked plan from the Washington Post that outlined and confirmed everything we've been talking about in terms of the beta test of Gaza, take down Gaza, rebuild in a Build Back Better plan, and build the technocracy that they want to bring to the West and the rest of the world. So even if you don't normally watch the geopolitical section, please hang around. This is getting more and more relevant for you. And we created a summary that really explains it. And I'm going to point you to a blog that we've launched as well. We've actually created like a 5-part blog series because we put it all together so you can watch it bit by bit. I'll give you some more guidance as we get to that at the end on how you can access that blog series as well. Right, so this week in geopolitics. So the last couple of weeks that I'll be covering, the Gulf Cooperation Council, which is the bloc that is decolonizing away from America and Europe that colonized its region, is basically consolidating its position as the regional hegemon. And my belief is that by following the money, the GCC is trying to negotiate with the US Proof of Weapons Network a strategic exit, and the GCC is headed by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that is really at the head of the negotiations. But it has its partners like Qatar, where it's doing the negotiations, and that funnels money to the various types of battles that are being fought in order to reset the world order through these covert operations and narrative control that's needed in order to be decolonized from the US Proof of Weapons Network. It's essentially negotiated, stop profiting from wars and destabilization, and instead will give you investment in the region and will be able to create much more money by your financial industrial complex co-investing with us. And eventually we want autonomy and control. And I know you want more control through joint investment agreements. But we want to remain sovereign because we got our sovereign wealth funds at the moment. In exchange for that, you get to take your military profits back over to you. You become a regional power, and may the best man win. And so that's what I think we're going through right now. So under that model, under the old model, military essentially served a purpose. And it also, the resistance movement of militancy, of funding resistance, which predominantly was done by Iran and Qatar, but was also done through these internal battles across the regions, and funding militants so that you don't engage in direct warfare. It served a purpose when the whole region was split up, which is what the British, the French, and the American Empire did. It tried to create divide and conquer across the region, and it fragmented the whole region into divide and conquer blocks, religious tensions, sectarian tensions, funded different groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda in order to create these Shia, Sunni, different types of battles. Then you had allegiances through Saudi Arabia that funded these different Wahhabi ideologies. And they would then be used by intelligence agencies in the West. Then you created the war on terror. You had CIA operations like 9/11. And Israel was essentially a part of the colony to steal money from the American taxpayer, money launder it through these wars, and then spend it back on US corporations to have this fake GDP and all the crony capitalism and trillions of dollars that was stolen from the American people and created this. And basically, these different types of groups made sense when there was a different convergence and people were arguing over territory. But now, thanks to China and thanks to competition to America, BRICS managed to normalize. GCC started to form its blocks. Iran started to form its blocks around its resistance. And China came along and normalized between Saudi Arabia and Iran and said, look what we can achieve together. We can expel the colonizers, and there is a new power in town. Let's align. Let's build a new vision. Let's de-dollarize, and let's shrink America to a regional power. And it worked. It's a dangerous operation, and it worked because America was vassalized into BlackRock, and so BlackRock was invested in these different regions, and so you have these regional battles to reset the world order. And so the GCC is essentially now fully aligned with BRICS and negotiating and aligned with the Proof of Weapons Network, and negotiated not through ideological alignment, but with practical alignment through normalization with Iran, because Iran is part of BRICS and part of the SCO that we covered in the macro section. And so at this stage, you have achieved your goal through militancy. And what happens? Militants become moving from an asset for regional power to a liability. And that's what I think we're witnessing right now. And so when militants block trade, and you want to move towards normalization, you have to go through a process of integrating those militants into actual armies and actual, regional vassalized powers or sovereign powers as well. Because what you want to do next is, if you are going to a region where the military is stopping the forever war model, you move towards energy investment. And the financial companies want to invest, and they don't want these different types of militants which destabilize the region and creates a bad investment. And so they need to go and be integrated so that you can isolate away from these different types of blocks. And so that's what I think we saw over the last 2 weeks, with an escalation into Yemen with the Houthis and the Houthis leadership. And normally when you had a targeted strike at the leadership, if it happens without any kind of regional chaos, regional destabilization, then this means that the significant powers are signed off on this being allowed to happen. And it's kind of like liability trimming. And so this is what I think we saw in the region. Hamas is essentially being pressured to integrate into the post-Gaza war governance framework that will be coming out with the Egypt and GCC plan. You're seeing in Syria that the PMF group, in Iraq, PMF, they started to create different types of laws to fold these different militia groups into these the state-controlled institutions. So you're seeing that happening more and more within Iraq. You're seeing in Syria that you had a reformed ISIS member that put on a suit and became the puppet government for the region that was funded by Turkey and the GCC. And so Syria is making more and more amends in order to integrate the SDF and the different types of militants into the region. Sometimes you have hardliners, and so you get these moments of violence, but in general, less and less violence, because that's being allowed to happen. Israel is basically intensifying its precision strikes on Hezbollah within Lebanon. There's lots of narratives around how to integrate, but it's coming after the hardliners. And rather than doing what it's always done when they're in the negotiation phase, which is just negotiate with death of civilians through its terrorist regime, it's actually specifically targeting, different types of hubs and leadership figures, rather than just going after civilians, as it still continues to do in Gaza as well. And so Israel is, I think, slowly, as it still continues this genocide. And I want to put things quite clear here. I've always made the distinction between my humanitarian self and my analysis based upon following the money. What is happening in Gaza is a humanitarian crisis, is a genocide, is a starvation crime. But it's just the first time that we're seeing it on camera, because this has happened all along throughout the British Empire and American Empire and across the different region. But we're now seeing, I believe, the first signs of Israel shifting from just broad conflict and chaos for forever wars, and being more focused on liability elimination for the military industrial complex exit. But obviously, military wants to make as much profit, sell as much bombs, drop as many bombs. So it's maximizing, pushing these negotiations to its limit. But I believe that it is eliminating liability for the Gulf Cooperation Council, BRICS now, and what the Proof of Weapons Network wants to rebuild in these AI data centers and everything it wants to rebuild in the region, as per Saudi Arabia's Project 2030 vision and various other things. So everything we're witnessing right now is, I believe, we're witnessing a transition from war optics to conflict, investment, and potential normalization. And so this is basically the approach that we're witnessing. It's disgusting, but this is how the Proof of Weapons Network works. You've just never been exposed to it in the West, as wasn't I until I started understanding from those in the region and those that can really analyze. And I combined it with my follow the money approach and some of the different analysis from Evan, who I'll point to in the blog as well, for those that want to follow those different types of approach. But basically, this type of approach, it redirects the region, and external audiences get to take the narrative that they want, but it sets up everything for the next stage of investment, where stability becomes basically the commodity, and it all replaces resistance and destabilization with stability. The Proof of Weapons Network basically wants war machine choke points to be controlled so they can create a stable environment for the rebuild and investment. You have different, it moves to negotiating reconstruction contracts, as sick as it sounds. What was this operation? It was using atrocities. Remember, go to the blog Atrocity Inc. on my blog on simondixon.com, where I showed all the false narratives from October the 7th. That becomes the false flag and the justification. It did happen. These things actually happen, but it wasn't anything like you were told. It was a hostage negotiation. There were hostages on both sides. The atrocities that you were told happened didn't happen. You can point to all the evidence if you haven't seen that on my blog. Look up, just put atrocity in the search field on simondixon.com blog. But now all of that was utilized in order to level everything, commit mass crimes against humanity. The US Proof of Weapons Network gets to profit from the whole thing. And then you look to stabilize the supply chains and rebuild so that you can finance the rebuild. And so the GCC, who's buying the exit, is co-investing with the BlackRock and the Proof of Weapons Network. BlackRock now sets up an office in Saudi Arabia. Members of Aramco aligned with Saudi Kingdom ends up on the board of BlackRock, and you get these different types of negotiations to buy away your freedom. And you get a substitute between these different types of models. The GCC now needs legitimacy because it's got its investors that wants to invest in this new region. They represent the bloc leadership. They negotiate the different types of normalizations with China and BRICS. And in exchange, the region gets isolations from sanctions, which is why the Iran nuclear deal was negotiated. And you get, pressure on the US from those that control the lobbies. And so then the government say, right, America, Trump administration, now you can remove those sanctions just like they did with Syria. And this is basically all orchestrated theater. And militancy is basically being converted into a structure that is governable through integration. And those that were funding the militias stop funding the militias now that they've got what they want. Because the whole point of is that this moves towards a solution. The solution is never the ideal solution. But you're not the one that's being sacrificed. You're not the one that's going through the genocide at the moment. And you're not the one that knows what it's like to try and negotiate decolonization. And so we saw this in Syria. It's never satisfactory. But this is what I think is happening. And I think the analysis is following what I think is happening. When blocks like the GCC and BRICS basically converge, the proof of weapons network profit just needs to change the pipeline. It needs to change it, and it needs to look for another country to go for. That's why we're seeing the different countries that is testing its military operations. And it moves from, an asset to a liability, and it needs to find a new asset. And that's what we're seeing in Venezuela right now. So it moves to different types of stage conflicts. And then we now, rather than these stage conflicts, these precision targets, in order to integrate and allow for a stable environment for investment. So Iran stopped funding the proxies, I believe. The 12-day war, I covered play by play. You can go back to that. I won't recover it here, but it gives everyone the narrative they need to move forward. If we end up in another one, it will be because there is staged agreements to get to the next stage, is my belief. And the GCC as the regional power in Iran gets to keep its ideology and remain autonomous. But it agrees to stop funding resistance and move over to normalization. Netanyahu, basically, he's the operator of the US military industrial complex. He always was. He's basically the colony project was run by him. The money goes back to military companies in the US. US gets GDP. It perpetuates the demand for dollars, just like it does with the petrodollar. But his goal all along has been essentially to save, himself. And it wasn't about the Israeli state, because the Israeli state was going to be moving through this transition. People at the higher parts of the negotiation. But he wanted proof of weapons network immunity. So he progressed, he pushed this genocide for longer and longer and longer to have strategic negotiations, because the international court were going to throw him in crime for genocide. That would have created liability over to US corporations. And so he used that leverage and gave himself protection from legal, financial, he's got himself institutional isolation, also from the internal corruption charges that were happening from the court and the judicial within Israel that led to the protests when Israel pre-October the 7th in the first place. And so it essentially means that he's negotiating his personal survival, and the proof of weapons network gets to isolate himself from being sued for the crimes against humanity. But it's not about Israel's survivals. Israel is moving from a US colony to a GCC vassal. And that's going to be done one investment at a time, one asset at a time, and through the same types of tactics of the IMF, but this time through GCC. And so investments equals control. That was the IMF strategy. You need to get rid of, basically, once you've got these different types of integrations, then you have the extreme Zionist ideology. Basically, the cabinet that's currently in charge, they get strategically weakened. We've already started to see this. This is where the US and Europe or different factions of Europe, not US, who have been negotiating with Saudi Arabia and Qatar. They've been saying we're going to recognize Palestine. You started to see more and more embargoes, more and more sanctions. You even started to see the media change its narrative on Israel. So it started to tell the truth about people like Smotrich and Gavir that are funding Israeli terrorists and settlers to take out Palestinians, bulldoze their lands, and expand their settlements. Those people now move from liabilities, and so the media starts telling you the truth, and you start to see actual truth about what Smotrich and Gavir and the crimes against humanity that they're currently inflicting. Because all of that blocks GCC integration. You can't have an extreme Zionist cabinet. And so the GCC gets to select their puppet government in Israel, which is the normal process. And it creates the optics, and you get to blame all the genocide and say it was those crazy extremists. And this is why you're seeing more and more of the algorithms in the technical industrial complex tell the truth about Israel. And so America gets to have the plausible deniability, say, no, it's because they blackmailed us. It was because, Jews rule the world and this Zionist thing. And, we've managed to break ourselves free, and they have the whole narrative. But you've also got to manage the Christian evangelical Zionists in America, which have been, they need to still believe that, it's a very complex operation that has to happen, but it needs legitimacy in order to, transition to these different types of blocks. And so as Israel basically shifts from a colony to a vassal, that will be done. And that's what I think we're seeing right now. Now, if you think that this is all conspiracy theory, the Washington Post released the plan, which was proposed by Tony Blair. And I'm going to give you a little AI summary. And I put together a long blog. I really want you to understand this. I know that we've covered a lot of content, but I want you to come back to this next week and watch the full blog, where I actually did a full breakdown on all the components of the plan, combined it with conspiracy theories that are becoming conspiracy facts, and then combined it with what's happening in the West, so that you can see the beta test for what they want to do in Gaza, so that when it comes to you, it's no surprise as well. And basically, it needs to have this moderate, it's almost like the extremists are being replaced by moderates, and you get the blame shifting and all the different things we talk about. But at the same time, you get Israel being downgraded by the GCC into a dependency, with organizations downgrading their bonds, and this internal struggle that you're seeing within America as it holds on to the old narrative. And so America becomes completely isolated, loses some of its power structures like hosting UN and legitimacy and various other things. Israel becomes a pariah, and then you have the overthrow of the cabinet with quote unquote less extremist GCC puppets, and Netanyahu probably dismantles the cabinet and has negotiated not being sacrificed by the network as well. I don't imagine him to continue into politics beyond this election cycle. But media then starts amplifying different lies, different narratives, and you see these different types of things around Smotrich and Gavir and the extremists that they've been through. So what I want to do right now, before we go through the closing parts of what happened this week that kind of tie into my following the money and the broader theory of what's happening here, is I want to play an AI summary of what I believe the proof of weapons network representing US corporate stock market interest has been negotiating via a tool of the POW, which is Tony Blair, who was a puppet government in the UK to push forward the Iraq war in reaction to the 9/11 and introduce the Terrorist Act and various other things. I want to go through the plan that he put forward to Trump. And I'm not saying this is going to be the final plan, but I want you to understand how they think in terms of what they want, because these are the same forces that are vassalizing Europe and America right now. And I want you to understand it. So it starts with the gaslighting announcement last time Netanyahu, I think it was 2 times ago, when Netanyahu visited the White House, as a reminder where Trump basically lays the narrative for what the plan was. And I think this plan was around that time, but we don't know the metadata. I tried to look at the metadata of the PDF, but it's all about controlling LNG flows, controlling different structures, and implementing a technocracy and a command and control structure that I said that they're trying to do with the UK operation at the moment. So what we'll do is we'll play the Trump and Netanyahu reminder. We'll go through the AI summary of my larger blog, and then we're going to come back and say how this ties in to everything this happened this week in geopolitics, and point you to further resources where you can view the full blog, because I really want you to watch it and go deep into this so you can understand the level of psychopathy that this technocratic institutions are willing to go to. So Azad, do you want to play the final AI summary that we're going to be doing this week?
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
Given what you've said about Gaza, did the U.S. send troops to help secure the security vacuum?
As far as Gaza is concerned, we'll do what is necessary. If it's necessary, we'll do that. We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into something really thought-provoking. It's Simon Dixon's research, specifically a blog post he wrote called Part 4, Endgame Gaza, the Beta Test for Global Control Systems.
Right, and that's part of his bigger series, Preparing Yourself in a World of Crypto, AI, and CBDCs.
Exactly. So our mission here is to unpack 2, distinct narratives that Dixon suggests are actually deeply interconnected.
Okay.
First, there's this idea of an AI-generated blueprint for global control, and second, a very real-world strategic plan for reconstructing Gaza.
And Dixon connects that specific Gaza plan to figures like Tony Blair and Donald Trump.
Yeah, so we're looking at where these 2 things, the AI theory and the real-world plan, might overlap and, what that could mean for all of us.
Definitely. And Dixon's work introduces this concept. He calls it the proof of weapons network.
Okay.
He describes it as this powerful, maybe stateless, global group operating sort of behind the scenes. And his core idea is that Gaza right now, it can be a beta test.
A beta test. For what?
For these global control systems. Systems that could potentially be rolled out elsewhere later on. We're just here to lay out the claims from Dixon's sources, present the connections he makes.
Right. No judgment from us, just presenting the information as found in the research. We want you, the listener, to think it through yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's try and unpack this. Dixon mentions this proof of weapons network idea. Let's look at the sources he used. The first one was an AI conversation.
Yeah, an AI conversation that apparently outlined this pretty stark vision of global control, a kind of technocratic agenda to centralize power.
And it warned about specific things.
Oh, yes. Things like mandatory digital IDs, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, mass surveillance, and these AI-driven smart cities.
Leading to what the AI called a digital prison. That sounds intense.
It does. The implication being total tracking and control, right?
Yeah.
Finance, movement, everything. The AI apparently even suggested that many crises are manufactured.
To justify these kinds of changes.
That was the claim. And also that world leaders are controlled. Pretty provocative stuff.
Okay, wow. So how does that very theoretical, almost sci-fi sounding AI warning connect to the real world?
Well, this is where Dixon draws the parallels to that great trust plan for Gaza.
Yeah.
It's actually quite striking when you put them side by side.
How so? Give me an example.
Okay, so the AI talked about national sovereignty fading in favor of global governance, right?
Yeah.
The Gaza plan proposes a U.S.-led multilateral custodianship. And crucially, it might retain plenary powers.
Plenary powers, meaning like absolute authority, even after local leaders are supposedly in place.
That's what plenary implies, yes.
Yeah.
It hints at a kind of managed order imposed from the outside.
Okay, that's a strong parallel on governance. What about the digital side? The AI warned about mandatory IDs.
It's incredibly direct in the Gaza plan. It explicitly says that within these new AI-powered smart cities, quote, all services and economy will be done through ID-based digital system.
All services and the economy through a digital ID.
Seems so. And get this. The funding model involves land tokenization and a blockchain registry. So people might trade their physical land deeds for digital tokens representing future homes.
Tokenizing land. That sounds efficient, maybe, but also like a massive shift in controlling property, right? Centralizing it digitally.
It certainly centralizes the record of ownership and potentially the control framework around it. And remember, the AI's claim about crises being used as a pretext.
Yeah, that crises are manufactured or exploited to centralize power. How does the Gaza plan fit there?
Well, the plan literally emerges from the current conflict. Dixon points out that the plan frames the destruction in Gaza as the, quote, essential prerequisite for this huge transformation.
An essential prerequisite. That's a very deliberate way to put it.
It is. It frames the crisis not just as a tragedy, but as the necessary catalyst to remake Gaza from what the plan calls a demolished Iranian proxy into a prosperous Abrahamic ally.
Aligning it with the Abraham Accords vision, basically, using the crisis as the justification for a complete overhaul.
That seems to be the argument presented. And then there's the city design itself. The AI warned about smart cities as digital cages.
Right. How does the Gaza plan's urban vision look?
It calls for building AI-powered, smart-planned cities. But the key is why. The design's wide streets, specific layouts, are explicitly mentioned as ways to address the root causes of insurgency linked to, older, denser city layouts.
So, redesigning the city to make surveillance easier and insurgency harder, building control into the very streets.
That certainly seems like a possible interpretation of designing cities to address insurgency's root causes linked to physical layout, easier monitoring, controlled movement. Now, one more connection.
Go on.
The AI conversation Dixon references apparently named Tony Blair as one of these supposedly controlled leaders.
Okay.
And Simon Dixon's blog directly attributes this very detailed, tech-heavy Gaza plan to Tony Blair and Donald Trump.
Wow. So that creates a direct, tangible link between the AI's broad claim and this specific real-world proposal attributed to the same person.
Exactly. It ties those threads together in a way that Dixon finds significant.
So, reflecting on all this, what does it mean for you listening? We've walked through two really detailed narratives here. And Dixon's research essentially asks us to consider if ideas once dismissed as maybe conspiracy theories are, well, becoming reality.
Yeah, with Gaza potentially being framed as this beta test site.
It raises some really big questions, doesn't it?
It really does. Like in a world that's being shaped by these huge technology-driven plans, how do we actually tell the difference between genuine progress and, well, the potential for really unprecedented levels of control?
And how much privacy, how much autonomy are people willing to trade away for feeling secure or for convenience?
Where's that line? It's a critical question for everyone, I think.
Absolutely. We really encourage you to think about these points, keep asking tough questions, and definitely seek out more information from different perspectives.
They're curious.
Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and stay well informed.
Mr. President, how do you know that the Palestinians don't want to leave their land? Some people say this is ethnic cleansing. You won't be able to force them to leave their land. They stay
We're moving
there.
them to a beautiful location where they have new homes, where they can live safely, where they'll have
But they won't
doctors
leave,
and
sir.
medical and all of those things. And I think it's going to be great. Yeah, any questions?
You said
Who are you
before that
putting in
the
charge
U.S.
of it?
would buy Gaza, and today you just said we're not going to buy Gaza.
We're not going to have to buy. We're going to have Gaza. We don't have to buy. There's nothing to buy. We will have Gaza.
What does that mean?
No reason to buy. There is nothing to buy. It's Gaza. It's a war-torn area. We're going to take it. We're going to hold it. We're going to cherish it.
And Mr. President, take it under what authority? It is sovereign territory.
Under the U.S. authority.
Wowzers. So if that doesn't make you want to bath and throw your phone at the screen, then I don't know what else would. And I don't think this is how it's going to work out. But this is what the US Proof of Weapons Network is negotiating, I believe, with the GCC in order to decolonize and replace the forever war demonic plan that has had for multiple decades and replace it with profiting from stability. And let me just make this clear. In their twisted, effed up mind, they think a multi-decade struggle for land by the Palestinians, who were essentially invaded by the British colonizers and tried to put Israel on top of Palestine from 1917 because of a negotiation between the British government and Walt Rothschild. That after expansion and expansion and expansion, that the right way to settle that physical land structure on the home where Jesus and prophets walked, that the plan is just to take it out, take all the churches out, take all the mosques out, take all the hospitals, take out the universities, take out all the culture, and tokenize it into a shitcoin, NFT, and give it to the Gazans that haven't been massacred. That is how they think. And Trump was installed, and he's meant to be giving, and I bet you he will get it, the Nobel Peace Prize. And you think he works for the American people? He's controlled. Governments are subordinate to the Proof of Weapons Network, and the Proof of Weapons Network is as evil as it gets, and that's what backs up the dollar. The dollar is backed up by weapons, by force, by death, destruction, and the whole thing started with a genocide of the native population of America from the Europeans. And now you wonder why I think it's probably good to move to multipolarity. Because this British Empire stroke American Empire stroke transatlantic whatever is finally being weakened by gold, and we're able to protect ourselves with Bitcoin, and we're able to boycott the system and opt out while they rewrote all of our history and made us think that we weren't doing this all along. Because this has been the constant state of the forces that backed up the pound and backed up the dollar, that was created from the Bank of England to fund war, genocide, death, destruction, rape, pillaging, and just absolute carnage. What you are witnessing in Gaza and what it is taking to free itself from that force is exactly how the dollar works. And this is why sometimes when you see me on spaces, getting highly frustrated with people saying we're the greatest country in the world, it's a little bit triggering for all the people that have been taken out by this dollar network. And so we have to re-educate ourselves. We have to learn the truth. And that's why I'm so passionate about coming to you each and every week at Bitcoin Hard Talk. And what I want to do is, I accept that it's a journey. I mean, it's taken me 25 years of following money to come to the understanding that I've come to. And even then, I'll get things wrong. It's still a team effort. I've been down many rabbit holes that don't take me in the right direction. But it's a community effort right now. And so if you see one little piece that you think would resonate with somebody, I try and create blog posts And I'm trying to make it more condensed into things that may interest people. And so what I want to demonstrate to you right now is 5 different blog posts that are completely public, require no login, have short AI summaries, longer summaries, written, verbal, as well as different types of videos on the different parts that I think the journey people need to go through to understand what's happening today. Part 1 is just understanding the operation of immigration and the Muslim invasion. If you think people need to know so they don't get tricked, send them part 1. There's a link. Part 2 on the Jews rule the world conspiracy theory. If they subscribe to that, then there is definitely Jewish power, which is a faction of billionaires. There's only 10% of the billionaires, 90% of them aren't. And so send them that, and they can understand that these narratives are weaponized in order to create civil unrest. In part 3, I covered a summary of what artificial intelligence tells us the end game is. This is what they're saying exists. And so I compared that with my belief in the proof of weapons network and created a very deliberate structure of what they're moving us towards. Part 4 is a summary of what they're doing in Gaza right now, a longer version plus a shorter version. So you can see what they're actually doing in Gaza so that you can see how they think about what they want to do with the rest of the world. And part 5 is anyone that wants to protect themselves with self-custody, how to do that. And I'll keep creating more and more content. Give me feedback below on what you want to see. And I'll keep covering Bitcoin Hard Talk every week. And I'll go through what happened this week that kind of reiterates where I might have got something wrong versus something that's going right now. And so all I want to do is go through the final bits. I know I've gone over slightly, but the final bits of what happened this week in geopolitics that reiterate my understanding, and then we'll close up for the week as well. And please give me feedback in the comments and share of what you'd like to see, what questions you have. I want to create as many resources as possible because I really think we are walking into this Bitcoin AI and CBDC world and stablecoin world, and people are really not taking seriously what's going to happen. And so as we move to this transition and GCC negotiation and this demonic plan, we started to see the GCC fight back against the proof of weapons network. Maybe these are negotiations as well. Maybe this is part of the strategic transition. So the UAE, which is highly aligned, already normalized with Israel, strategically aligned with America, but part of the GCC as well, probably the one that has the most, given the most power to the West in terms of some of their moves, even using some of the proof of weapons network atrocities in Sudan at the moment in order to control various factions of the North African routes. They warned Israel. Normally they wouldn't do this. It's the strongest warning we've seen from them. It's happening for a reason. They said, if you annex the West Bank, that is their red line. That is the end of the Abraham Accords. That is the end of the normalization agreement. In terms of Israel, in order to show the extremists like Gavir and Smotrich, they publicly released their announcement that they said that they're going to take 21 different routes and they're going to expand illegal settlements in the West Bank. And that was met with 21 different countries, including the UK, France, that issued a joint statement saying that they condemn Israel's approval of any new settlement projections and any new projects within the West Bank to terrorize Palestinians. And it was a project that Smotrich and Gavir announced called E1. You know, this is, I think, designed to show them as the extremists that they are, and this made it to the Western media. They called the decision basically completely unacceptable, a flagrant breach of international law, a threat to the two-state solution. And these things have always happened. But now they're telling them to you because we're moving to that next phase, because maybe they found a plan that they're willing to agree with. And hopefully it doesn't involve giving the Palestinians a shitcoin NFT in exchange for their physical land and bribing them to leave the land. But there were different signatories to the statement, and it included Australia, Canada, Italy. Suddenly we're told that these people just recognize the genocide, the starvation, the famine. No, they're all puppet governments. And if you think it's a conspiracy theory, it's obvious that it's a conspiracy fact at this stage. The Proof of Weapons Network selects. You don't elect. Your vote is meaningless. And they create a theater to distract you with saying communism is the enemy, or China is the enemy, or Russia is the enemy, or the Democrats are the enemy, or the Republicans are the enemy, or the Labours, or the Conservative, or the Reform, or Nigel Farage, or the immigrants. It's always manufacturing an enemy to make sure you never know who controls the shot as well. We had an announcement from Turkey that is banning any ships that go to Israel, any ties with economic activity with Israel. It says that it's suspending all trade. You know, I think the oil will still flow, which is the major thing, but, you know, we'll see. We had an announcement from France. You know, I'm not buying, I don't know what these negotiations actually are. I'm just trying to follow the money and put it together with the information that we have and consolidate that with other analysts that I respect as well. But France said that it is planning to open an embassy in the West Bank in order to actually be located in the West Bank. This is after they recognize Palestine as a state on the 22nd of September. And so there will also be a Palestinian embassy in France. More and more countries said that they're going to do this on the 22nd of September. It's likely only to be left with someone maybe Hungary and America as the last states in the world that don't recognize. Complete isolationism. And this is only happening because the Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the GCC have been negotiating, and because there was the normalization deal with China between Iran and Saudi Arabia, in my opinion. And they've been applying their leverage in order to get to this point. Now, what's interesting, when all these countries said that they're going to recognize Palestine at the United Nations, how did the US react? They decided to remove the visa for the Palestinian representative of the United Nations. This means that the US is no longer able to host the United Nations because it's never been independent. But the promise is of United Nations that you always allow the representative to enter your country. This means that US has lost the right to be an impartial host of the United Nations. That is what makes a world hegemon. That is what makes the global leader. And where are these negotiations happening? They're happening at the SCO meetings as well. So US can no longer call itself the trusted host of the United Nations. To me, that represents the symbolic genocide that's being paid for with US taxpayers' money, that is now the country that cannot be trusted to host the United Nations. This marks the type of symbolic element, the type of symbolic gesture that leads to the fall of an empire. And as I said, it started with a genocide by the Europeans, and I think it's going to be slowly deconstructed with the genocide of the Palestinians. And it never stopped doing it all the way along. And it made us think that something completely different was happening. And so we need to rewrite history. We just need to be honest. And we can only defeat the Proof of Weapons Network with truth. And without truth, there can be no peace, because then you're going to be distracted with politicians believing that that's the solution. The real solution is that we recognize who power is, where power lies, and we commit to truth, and we boycott, we educate, we divest, and we put pressure to sanction. And that's why I'm passionate about boycotting the Federal Reserve by owning your money outside the system. That can be done with gold or Bitcoin. Once you do that, it's been given the reward of beating other asset classes, which allows you to escape the system in terms of the inflationary impact historically. Can't give financial advice. But when you boycott it, you don't do it and hold it with BlackRock, because you don't want them to have the power so that they have the negotiation chip of Bitcoin in the currency war. You want yourself to have it. And once you have it, you don't want to give the bank more power by custodying it with them and borrowing against it with fiat currency. And when you keep it where you can hold it and you can spend it in self-custody, you're able to direct the flow of capital, and you can decide where you're going to take your spending money or stable coins or wherever it goes. And you can direct it into supporting your community. And you can invest in decentralized solutions rather than giving your money to BlackRock, where it invests it all for you. That's how we fight back. That's the struggle. That's the resistance. So always remember, you are alive at one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. Most are going to get wrecked. Others are going to do really well. I want you to be on the right side of the change, and share my content with anyone that you would also like to understand this information and get on the right side of this change. We want to do it with peace, love, and unity. I do believe that Bitcoin is the peaceful resistance. And I'd like to build a community of as many people that are doing the same, owning more Bitcoin every month, regardless of the price, learning self-custody, deciding to make Bitcoin stronger by running nodes, and going through that journey together, because that's what you need for decentralized identity, decentralized artificial intelligence, decentralized social networks, decentralized money. That's how we win. We're not going to take down the whole network, but we can create a larger portion of people that are able to influence the network until eventually we can afford, through wealth, a position that I've been blessed to be put in, where you can buy the lobbies if you want. You can influence politics, because they only listen not by your vote, by the vote of your money, because in the West, they are all prostitutes and you can buy them through lobby. And that's the only way to engage in politics, or you exit, or you recognize where real power lies, and you don't waste your time with wrong power. What I'd like you to do is, if you enjoyed this content and you're not a subscriber already, please subscribe, hit the bell symbol, hit all. Please do follow me on Rumble in case I get taken off YouTube. Please do subscribe to the podcast on Apple and Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And please do get your guide to self-custody by going to simondixon.com and getting your username and login. And if you want the free content, head over to the blog and you can look for that part 1. The part 4 we're going to be constructing next week, so it will be available from next week, because I want you to see what's happening in Gaza and how it relates to what they might want to do for you. It was always a beta test, and we are at a very, very interesting time. So that's going to be everything for Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 96, the new Shanghai Proof of Weapons Network, so that we can enter into competing interests rather than the atrocities of the global hegemon. I'll see you for episode 97 next week. Peace.